They threw me out when I needed them most. I was pregnant, I was scared, but they cared more about their reputation than their own daughter. My name is Mary, and before we continue, please write in the comments which country you're watching this video from. Enjoy the story. I still remember that night as if it is carved into my skin. The air outside was cold, but the coldness I felt in my own house cut deeper than any winter wind. I was just a teenager, trembling, trying to gather the courage to tell my parents the truth. I thought maybe, just maybe, they would hug me, cry with me, scold me, and then say, "We'll get through this together." That's what family is supposed to do, right? But I was wrong, so painfully wrong. When I whispered the words, telling them I was pregnant, silence filled the room first. My mother's face went pale. My father's lips tightened like a vice. And then the storm came, not of concern or comfort, but of shame, accusations, and disappointment. They weren't worried about me or the little life growing inside me. Number. They worried about what the neighbors would think, about what the church would say, about how people would whisper behind their backs. I begged. I cried. I told them I needed them more than ever. My hands were shaking, my heart was racing, and tears blurred my vision. But their eyes were stone, cold, unblinking, merciless. My father's voice thundered through the house as he told me to pack my things. My mother's silence was worse than any scream. It was the silence of someone who chose pride over love. That night, I dragged a small bag through the hallway where I once ran as a child. My steps were heavy, each one echoing like a goodbye. The home that once smelled of dinners and laughter now smelled like rejection and betrayal. I stood by the door, waiting, hoping one of them would change their mind, call my name, pull me into their arms. But nothing. Not a word, not a touch, not even a glance. And then, the door closed behind me. I was outside, carrying more than just a bag. I carried my unborn child. I carried fear that gnawed at my insides. I carried the crushing realization that the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had turned their backs the moment it got hard. The night was silent, except for my sobs. I felt like the world had ended, and maybe in some ways it had. I walked aimlessly, clutching my belly, whispering to the little life inside me that I would protect them no matter what, even if I had no roof, no family, no safety. At that moment, I promised my child what my parents failed to promise me, that they would never be abandoned, never be thrown away like I was. That night didn't just strip me of my home, it stripped me of my innocence. It forced me to grow up in an instant, to trade the life of a teenager for the life of a mother fighting against the world. It was the beginning of the hardest journey I would ever walk. I had no money, no bed, no roof, just a trembling body carrying a child and a heart that felt like it was already breaking apart. That first week after being kicked out was a blur of fear and exhaustion. I wandered the streets, clutching my small bag, searching for somewhere, anywhere, to feel safe. But every corner I turned reminded me of the home I no longer had. At night, I would sit on park benches, hugging my belly for warmth. The wind cut through my thin jacket, and I shivered until my teeth hurt. My stomach growled constantly, but food wasn't easy to find. I went days living on small snacks people gave me when I looked too weak to stand. I hated the way strangers pitied me, but without their kindness, I wouldn't have survived. Every step felt heavier, because I wasn't just carrying myself anymore. I carried the responsibility of the little heartbeat inside me. I spoke to my baby when the loneliness threatened to drown me. I whispered promises in the dark, telling them they would never know this kind of pain, that I would fight for them even if the world turned its back on me. But the truth is, there were moments I almost gave up. One night, I sat under a bus shelter, rain pouring so hard the sound drowned my sobs. My clothes were soaked, my hair plastered to my face, and I felt so small, so powerless. I thought about walking into the middle of the road and letting it all end. I thought maybe the world would be better without another unwanted girl and her baby. But then a woman stopped. She held out an umbrella. Her hands were warm as she pressed it into mine. She didn't say much, just a soft, "Take care of yourself, sweetheart." It was such a simple thing. But that night, it was enough to stop me from ending everything. That moment reminded me that not all people are cruel. Sometimes, even the smallest kindness can save a life. As the weeks passed, I found temporary shelters, church basements, crowded rooms filled with women who had stories as broken as mine. I met people who had nothing yet still shared what little they had with me. Their strength inspired me. They taught me that family isn't always the one you're born into, but sometimes the one you find along the way. My pregnancy grew harder. My back ached. My feet swelled. I was constantly tired. But each time I thought I couldn't go on, I felt my baby kick, reminding me why I had to keep fighting. I wasn't just surviving for myself anymore. I was surviving for them. Still, the shame followed me everywhere. I could feel people's stares, their whispers. Another mistake. Another girl ruined. I wanted to scream that I wasn't ruined, that my child wasn't a mistake. But instead, I kept my head down, swallowed the tears, and walked forward. Each day tested me in ways I didn't know were possible. Hunger gnawed at me. Fear followed me. Loneliness clawed at my chest. But somehow, some way, I kept moving. Because deep down, I knew that if I could survive this storm, I could survive anything. And one day, I would show my child that their mother was stronger than the people who abandoned her. Starting over was nothing like the stories people tell you. There was no sudden miracle, no stranger handing me a golden ticket out of misery. It was slow, painfully slow. Every inch of progress came with bruises, sweat, and tears. At first, all I wanted was stability, a roof, a bed, and food that didn't come from someone's leftovers. I found small, part-time jobs, whatever I could manage while carrying my child. Some people turned me away the moment they saw my stomach. Others gave me a chance, but it was never easy. I worked cleaning offices after hours, scrubbing floors until my back ached. I babysat for mothers who barely had more than me, earning just enough to eat and keep a spot at the shelter. When my daughter was born, everything changed. Holding her in my arms for the first time felt like the world cracked open and showed me a new reason to fight. She was so small, so fragile, yet her tiny cry filled me with a strength I didn't know I had. Suddenly, survival wasn't just about me anymore. Every choice I made had to be for her. The early years were brutal. Sleepless nights, empty cupboards, days when I went hungry so she wouldn't. I stitched old clothes into little dresses for her, sometimes patching the same fabric 3-4 times. People looked at me with pity, some with judgment, but when I saw her smile, I knew none of it mattered. She was my whole world. Education was the next mountain. I had dropped out when I was pregnant, but I refused to let that be the end of my story. With help from a community program, I enrolled in evening classes. I studied after putting my daughter to bed, sometimes with her tiny body curled against mine as I memorized formulas and definitions. There were nights I fell asleep with a textbook on my chest, tears of exhaustion soaking the pages. It wasn't glamorous, but slowly I chipped away at the future I wanted. Each certificate, each step forward, felt like reclaiming a piece of the life my parents had thrown away when they shut the door on me. And I wasn't alone anymore. Along the way, I met people who became my real family. A teacher who stayed late to help me with math. A neighbor who watched my daughter when I couldn't afford childcare. Friends from the shelter who celebrated every little victory with me. None of them were bound to me by blood, but they showed me a kind of loyalty and love my own family never had. There were setbacks, of course. Jobs lost, rent overdue. Days when I wanted to scream from the weight of it all. But then my daughter would run to me, her little arms wrapping around my neck, whispering, "I love you, Mommy." That was enough to silence every doubt. I realized then that family isn't always the people who share your last name. Family is the ones who stand by you when you're broken, the ones who choose you, who lift you up when you can't stand on your own. I built my life piece by piece with grit and love, and though it was never perfect, it was ours. My daughter grew up not in luxury, but in the warmth of a home filled with strength, laughter, and resilience. That's when I finally understood. I didn't just survive, I rebuilt. 15 years. That's how long it had been since the night they shut the door on me. 15 years since I stood shivering outside, begging for a sliver of love that never came. In those years, I had built something real, a home, a life. My daughter was no longer a baby in my arms. She was a teenager with dreams of her own, strong-willed and kind, her laughter filling every corner of our house. I thought I had left the past behind. Then one evening, there was a knock at the door. I almost didn't answer. It was late and I wasn't expecting anyone. But when I pulled it open, my breath caught in my throat. There they were, my parents. Older, smaller somehow, their hair gray and their shoulders stooped. For a moment, I just stared, frozen in time. My heart raced, my palms grew clammy, and suddenly I was 18 again, pregnant, terrified, and standing outside their house begging to be let in. "Mary," my mother whispered, her voice trembling, "it's us. Please, we just want to see you." My father stood behind her, quiet, his eyes shifting away from mine. The same man who once told me I was no longer his daughter couldn't even look me in the eye. The sight of them, after all these years, ripped something raw inside me. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. I had imagined this moment countless times. In my darkest hours, I fantasized about them showing up, apologizing, begging for forgiveness. And here they were. But instead of joy or relief, all I felt was rage. "You want to see me?" I said, my voice low. "After 15 years? After you threw me out when I needed you most?" My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We were wrong, Mary. We were scared, ashamed of what people would say. But we've had time to think. We've missed you every day." Her words twisted the knife. Missed me? Did they miss me when I was giving birth alone in a hospital room? When I was eating one meal a day so my daughter could eat two? When I was walking to night classes in the rain because I couldn't afford bus fare? They wanted to meet their grandchild. That's what they said next, as if she was a prize they were owed, as if they had any right to her love. I looked over my shoulder at my daughter, who had come to the door, curious. She glanced at me, her big brown eyes searching my face for answers. She didn't know these people. To her, they were strangers. And maybe that's all they deserved to be. The hypocrisy burned through me like fire. For years, I had carried the weight of their rejection. I had built my life without them. Now they wanted back in, as if the past could simply be erased. I stood there trembling, torn between slamming the door and letting them face the child they abandoned along with me. My whole body shook as the choice pressed down on me. Family. The word had once broken me, but now it was my power. I had to decide. Did they deserve a place in the life I fought so hard to create, or was it time they finally felt the full weight of what they had done? They stood on my doorstep, their voices trembling, their faces lined with regret. My mother's tears rolled freely down her cheeks as she reached out, almost as if touching me would erase the years she had abandoned me. My father stayed a step behind her, silent, but I could see the strain in his jaw, the shame he didn't know how to put into words. "Mary, please," my mother whispered. "We've thought about you every single day. We made a mistake, a terrible one. We let fear and pride blind us. But we're here now. We want to make things right." For a moment, I almost laughed. Make things right? As if that was possible. As if 15 years of loneliness, 15 years of struggle, could be washed away with a few shaky apologies. I thought of the nights I cried myself to sleep, holding my newborn, wondering how I would keep her safe. I thought of the jobs I worked, the hunger I endured, the exhaustion I wore like a second skin. I thought of the girl I used to be, the one who stood outside their door, begging for love. That girl was gone. I wasn't her anymore. I straightened my shoulders, my voice calm but steady, carrying all the pain they had left me with. You don't get to come back after 15 years and pretend you care. You don't get to ask to see my daughter when you left us with nothing. My daughter stood close to me, her hand slipping into mine. She didn't say a word, but she didn't need to. The way she clung to me was answer enough. I had been her world. I had been enough. My mother sobbed, covering her face with her hands. My father finally spoke, his voice hoarse. We're old now. We don't have much time left. We can't change the past, but maybe we can be a family again. Please, Mary. That word, family, it struck me like a whip. Family was supposed to protect you. Family was supposed to love you when the world didn't. But when I needed them most, they weren't my family. They were strangers who had chosen their reputation over their daughter. I took a deep breath, the weight of 15 years pressing down on me and then lifting, as if the truth was finally freeing me. You're right, I said softly. We can't change the past, and I've accepted that. But don't come here expecting to erase what you did. Don't expect my daughter to see you as grandparents. She already has everything she needs, and I have everything I need, without you. Their faces crumbled. My mother whispered my name again, desperate, broken. But I shook my head. I had carried their choices for too long. I had bled for their absence, and I had built myself from the ruins they left me in. I looked down at my daughter, smiled, and squeezed her hand. Then I turned back to them. You made your choice 15 years ago, and tonight I'm making mine. With that, I closed the door. The sound echoed through the house like finality itself. My daughter leaned her head against my shoulder, and I held her close. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the ache of abandonment. I felt peace. Because the truth was, I wasn't the broken girl they threw out. I was a woman who had survived. And sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is walk away.